The US presidential elections are here. We see from different opinion polls that there is a very slender margin between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. And there are several swing states, and as many as 16% of registered voters are still undecided. But given the kind of society we have in the United States today, there are people who are saying that it is more likely that Harris is going to make it. And Donald Trump, however, is going great guns on X, which is owned by Elon Musk, since he took over Twitter. And in mainstream media, we see Kamala Harris far ahead. Obviously, both the sides are playing their favorites. So to put the things in right perspective, and especially for the Indian audience that needs to know what are the differences between the American system of elections and the Indian system, we have some distinguished panelists with us, all based in the United States. Welcome all of you, Professor Ramesh Rao. And first of all, we start with you. And as we move to the other panelists, I'll introduce them as well. Professor Rao, how do you see things from here on? The election day has arrived.
Yes, thanks, Surajit, for inviting me. I am in that kind of swing state, Georgia, which is one of the states that we are being told is going to decide the election. It was leaning blue, it was leaning purple, then it was leaning red, but right now again it is supposedly going purple. We don't know.
All right.
And you know, it's been a record turnout in terms of the early elections. I think more than 60% of the people have voted ahead of time,
Right.
which means that people are really concerned and also very invested in the outcome. But you are right. I think the polls are showing that it could go anyway, but and until about maybe about a week ago, 10 days ago, they were saying, the Republicans, President Trump was having, a kind of a momentum. But that has again changed over the last few days. And going into the elections tomorrow, it is up in the air.
Right. So just for the information of the uninitiated in India, if you could just explain what you meant by red and blue, and also you would, I'd like you to put in perspective an observation I made over the past 20 or 30 years in these US presidential elections. That is, let's say, until about 20 years ago, I saw that the coastal states tend to prefer Republicans, and they are also economically more advanced, whereas the Midland states preferred Democrats. That has drastically changed over the past 2 decades. Why is that?
Yeah, the U.S. is now a much more diverse country. You can see that even in Georgia, for example. If you were to go to Atlanta, there are places in Atlanta where you think it is Hyderabad, because you see so many Telugu people. So you drive into the Costco parking lot, and a large majority of them are Indians, a few other Asians, which used to be predominantly white, or as in the case of Georgia, mostly black and white.
So demographic change. Demographic change accounts for this change.
Yeah, the demographic shift. And then over the past, and especially in terms of President Obama's term, there were kind of programmatic, political, cultural shifts that made it also, because he was, whatever I now might think about President Obama as just another vulgar elite. I voted for him. I went campaigning for him
Right.
because he portrayed, he symbolized the kind of maybe America that a lot of people wanted. Because
Right.
now we have such diversity that the diversity itself might be becoming a weakness, just like as it is
Hmm.
in India, as it
A
is
liability.
turning out in Europe.
A liability, maybe, this diversity.
Liability, yes. Simply because I think there are so many interests that we
Yeah.
really don't know, if it's basically a whole bunch of tribes and each tribe seeking to gain advantages. And when that happens, and when the tent is so big and you have these diverse interests, you don't know at what particular time, right now they're all pulling together, that they may
Right.
turn around and start shooting at each other.
Oh, so finally, for the convenience of Indian audience, what is red and what is blue?
uh, the symbolism. Thankfully, in the U.S., it is just red and blue, and maybe you have the Green Party and a couple of libertarians and so on. Unlike in India, where God knows how many symbols do we have for political parties.
Yes.
Red symbolizes the Republicans, conservatives, and the blue symbolizes the Democrats, quote unquote
Yeah.
liberal, progressive.
Yeah. So that was Professor Rao from Georgia. We also have with us Ritwich. He is joining us from California. Welcome to the show, Ritwich. And your initial thoughts about how the election is looking from here.
Yeah, so I'm from California.
Yeah.
In a sense, the president, my vote doesn't matter either way because Kamala Harris will win the state, right? And the unique thing about
Okay.
the way that US politics works versus Indian politics is that for reasons in our country's founding, that this was a union of states rather than a federal union like Bharat was. Here, whoever wins the state gets all the votes of that state, right? So, for example, California has 55 electoral votes. This state is probably two-thirds Democrat, one-third Republican, right?
Okay.
10 million Republican votes.
Going by the registered voters, you mean?
Yes, by registered voters, and by polls, by previous elections, all of that, right? Generally
Okay.
speaking, Kamala Harris should get around 66% of the votes, Trump should get 33%. Because
Mm-hmm.
Kamala Harris is majority, all 100% of votes will go to Kamala Harris, right? The
Okay.
55 votes will go to her. The 10 million voters that are Republican that voted for Trump for president will, in a sense, not count.
All
For
right.
that matter, I mean, I have a Republican bias. I hold a position in the local Republican Party. I also won some awards. I work closely with the RNC, all of that. So, with that in mind, I should also say that it can impact Democrats as well, right? In a state like Texas, where you'll see similar situations, but more Republicans than Democrats, those Democrats' votes will
Okay.
not come. So that's why these swing states, like where Ramesh is from, matter so much because most states are already decided, right? We know that Texas, we know that Mississippi will vote Trump. All those votes will go to Trump. We know that California, we know Massachusetts will vote Kamala Harris. All those votes will go there. Places like where
Okay.
Ramesh is, that is where the election is very difficult to understand, right? Because those places have almost equal voter registration. And so the
All
question
right.
is, can Trump swing votes to his side or can Kamala Harris swing votes to hers?
Yeah.
From that perspective, my bet, I was very much up in the air as to who would win. I think now Trump has a very good shot, right? From what I'm seeing, few factors here, right? One, this whole Israel-Palestine conflict.
Okay.
A lot of the Muslim vote
Mm-hmm.
is pulling away from Kamala Harris. Not all of it is going to Trump for obvious
Okay, so
reasons.
you mean, sorry to interrupt, you mean that issues do matter. It is not that everybody has decided either Republican or Democrat. Issues do matter, you mean?
Issues, the thing is, right? Most of us are here on issues. I think the Indian American community is a great example, right?
Okay.
Historically, up till Obama time, we were all Democrat, right? Like even my family, everyone was Democrat. We all loved Obama. We all voted Obama, right? Why? Because the Democratic Party was basically the party of immigrants. Then, as people started becoming more anti-Hindu, started becoming more anti-India, started supporting wokeism, started supporting racial preferences that hurt our students in college admissions,
Right.
many of us switched over to the Republican Party, right?
Yeah.
For that matter, another example is more recently the Muslim American community, right? They were all
Okay.
Democrats, and now as a protest against Kamala Harris and her flip flopping on Gaza, right? So, for example, in Michigan, she'll put up a pro-Palestine ad.
Okay.
In Pennsylvania, which has more Jewish influence, she'll put a pro-Israel ad, right? Because of this, a lot of them
All
have
right.
started joining very critical in this election. And we are, as a Hindu community, looking out for the people who look out for our best interests. And
Okay,
right now,
hold
that
that
seems to be
thought,
Donald Trump.
Ritwik. I'm going to take two points, one from your presentation and the other
Sure.
from Professor Rao's, to Richa Gautam. Richa is joining us from Colorado. Richa, there are two questions. Welcome to the show. There are two questions I have for you. One is a very basic one. How are things looking from Colorado? And the other thing is this demographic change issue, how it has also affected Indians. And then the question is there is a peculiarity I notice among Indians. Till the time they are in India, it is like a nationalist people supporting a nationalist party, and out of Republicans and Democrats, Republicans are supposed to be more nationalists. But then, once they move to the US, they find that perhaps Democrats are more tolerant towards the colored people, towards Hispanics, towards Indians, towards Chinese people. And maybe that is one reason why once the Indians move from India to the United States, they start supporting the Democrats, whereas they were supporting Republicans when they were back here in India. How do you explain that?
Yes, thank you so much. I think I will address your second question first. So the
Okay.
Democrats, as a legacy, they have been the party of the immigrant from the times of the Tammany Hall. When America began, sort of. So
Yeah.
definitely, when we come here, we find a home as Democrats, and it is the sort of a tent, the big tent, as Rameshji called it, where we basically tend to set foot, and we have a lot of us have been legacy Democrats. It is only in the past few years, and again, I think you asked a very important question: what has changed in the past 2 decades? What happened that there has been a big shift? What has been a big shift is that the Democrats have sort of moved very far left. In 2006, when the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council was formed, they created this progressive left movement, which moved so down the path of socialism that even legacy Democrats who have moved from the Eastern European nations or the Hindu Americans started to note a big shift, where the Democrats started to resemble a sort of a Hindu-phobic sort of a group, and we were facing a lot of hate crimes in cities and states which were particularly very Democrat, very blue, as Rameshji said. Blue is Democrats, red is Republican. So
Right.
I think that has been a big reason for the shift. Now, the 2 decades, exactly 2 decades that you mentioned, is a very important point for me as
Yeah.
well. In the past, the voting pattern was very clear. Like, there has been a book called by Joel Garrow, who said there are 9 nations within America, and there were issue-based politics across all these 9 nations, and that is what
Yeah.
the politicians or the candidates used to go around talking about. Whether it is the Bible Belt down south, or whether it is the in New Englanders, the Anglo-Saxon community, and so there were political cultures is a very important term here. So the political culture here was issue based. It was based on traditional values in some parts. It was based on progressive multicultural values in other parts because of immigration. But now, as we have been discussing, there are just out of the 50 states, most states have clearly decided whether they are red or blue, based on the
Okay.
electoral college. But what matters now are literally seven states. Seven states only are going to make the difference for who is going to win, right? And out of the seven states, also, there's clear like leads in certain states, like Arizona, I think is favoring Trump, whereas, and Michigan. Now, again, I want to just go into the political cultures part of it. And that, if you see, again, I want to corroborate what Rameshji said and add to that, just like in Indian politics, small identity politics have become so important, and small groups have their own demands. It could be the religious vote, like the Muslim vote. It could be the sort of the small caste-based votes in India. Similarly, you have identitarian politics seeping into America because of these pockets of swing states. And these states are now going to largely have the Hindu American vote is going to have a big impact. The Muslim American vote is going to have a big impact, the Hispanic vote. So all of these little political sort of groups, identity groups have become so important to these swing states. And so even though we might have small, vote share, but we are the ones who are going to swing it, in the toss-up states. So these are battleground states where I think there's a big fight. So that's why you see the Muslim vote. They are literally punishing Harris for what not standing up for Palestine. They are
Okay.
literally
Yeah.
splitting.
But are Muslims so is there concentration more in certain states, or do we see that they are now as large in numbers, as larger group in terms of numbers as they are in several Western European countries? I don't think so.
Well, they don't have that much traction. You are so right. But
Yeah.
again, they have established pockets of strongholds, like Michigan, for example, right? Michigan, I think the Arab vote there is now a toss up vote because Trump is wooing them. Now, the big change that has happened is the Muslims have actually formed
They
a civil
actually have a
alliance
Muslim
with
mayor
America.
there, right? They actually have a Muslim mayor in Michigan.
They do. They do in Hamtramck,
Yes.
and there are others. Yeah, there are areas which are very strong, and the Arab vote will definitely make a big difference. And they, one thing very important that I want to point out is they are actually putting up a strong support for Jill Stein of the Green Party. Okay, now
Okay.
that 2% vote, which is it's a pretty much a split between Kamala Harris and Jill Stein. And that is a new phenomenon right now because that vote is going to have an impact on Kamala Harris's vote because, we are hearing pleas from Europe, from a lot of the anti-Trumpers who are saying that please don't, vote for Jill Stein. But the Muslims are so they are an important vote bank right now for Harris, and they have put their money behind, or their vote behind, Jill Stein. Also, Trump is also wooing them. So again, there are issue based, but let's face it, foreign policy has become so important at this time. The Hindus are upset about what's happening in Bangladesh, and Trump has come out
Right,
and
right.
support
I was just
this.
coming to that, and I would like to throw open that question to all three of you. You may
Yes.
answer that one
I
by
will just
one.
close that the foreign
Yeah,
policy, which usually is never been such a big issue, but because of the immigrant vote being so important, today you see the impact of Bangladesh or what happens in Palestine, very important to the swing vote bank.
right, right. So, Professor Rao, Rutvij, and Richa, one by one, if you could throw some light on the attitude of the American media towards India, because we are looking at these elections also in terms of how much India is going to benefit or may suffer because of either one of them getting elected. Is it a right assessment by many Indians, or I would say a majority of Indians, that Republicans are going to be more pro India in their foreign policy, or is that a misplaced assessment? Especially in the light of the comment that Donald Trump recently made on X, expressing concern for Hindus in Bangladesh, and also once again repeating that Prime Minister Modi is his close friend, something that Harris hasn't said yet, which actually she might not have had that kind of an interaction that Joe Biden might have had or Barack Obama had had earlier. So, how do you see it, Professor Rao?
Yeah, I think a number of things have changed in American politics. What used to be mostly Republican concern and support, for example, just in terms of the military-industrial complex or big tech, it used to be mostly a kind of a red support issue, whereas now it is the Democrats who are really in support of this, support against, in favor of the war against Ukraine, sorry, against Russia, or the kind of regime change that, even though the US is claiming that they had nothing to do with Bangladesh, we know that we had something to do with it. After all, Obama took out a full page advertisement in the Washington Post along with Bill Clinton in support of Muhammad Yunus. How is it that a president goes and does something like that? And we now know also, just because of the nature of progressive politics or so called progressive politics, the media has been against the Narendra Modi BJP government. And this is where I think also, if we are to track the Hindu vote, it is simply because now we are caught in this kind of a dilemma. We were Democrats, we were liberal, but now because the sheer animosity, if not contempt, of the Narendra Modi BJP government, which shows
Mm-hmm.
that there is a problem here. And I think that really is, therefore foreign policy, and what used to be the kind of playbook for the Republicans and for the right wing is now the playbook for the Democrats and the left wing. And that is the paradox right now in this election.
Okay. How do you see it, Rutvij? And also, please throw some light on an observation about the election 4 years ago in 2020, when, unlike what was being predicted in the opinion polls, as far as the demography of the United States is concerned, it was not seen, it was not observed that colored people, black people are so, kind of hostile towards Republicans, because the biggest factor that came out 4 years ago was the handling of COVID pandemic. And lots of voters thought that perhaps the Democrats could handle it better, which proved perhaps wrong later on. But then that was an idea that Donald Trump hasn't been able to handle the pandemic well. So, is it all about demography, or there are other issues?
I mean, look, right? Obviously, there are other issues. The term that's used in America for them is kitchen table issues, right? I mean, I can only really care about, all of these other issues that we discuss as long as I have food on the table. But at the same time, right? One, Trump generally tends to be trusted better on those. If you look at polls, when they look at issue-based voters, right? So they'll ask here, oh, who do you think is better on abortion? Who do you think is better on the economy? Who do you think is better on foreign policy? On the economy, on issues like that, Trump leads every single time. One. Second point you brought up was about ethnic minorities, right? One thing that I've
Yeah.
noticed, I part of the reason behind this is that Democrats have brought it on themselves, right? They like diversity, but they like it at a very surface level, right? So, for example, Indians, right? Democrats love Indians as long as we have a surface level of Indianness, right? They will love Indians as long as we listen to Bollywood, maybe say one or two Hindi phrases, bring some samosas to a party, they like it.
So very
The moment
cliched idea about India and Indians. You mean
I
they
know
have
it's
very cliched ideas about India and Indians? Yeah.
very cliched ideas, one, but two, they expect us to conform to their cliched ideas. And the moment they have to step out of their, zones and try to accommodate something, they refuse to do so, right? That's why you saw radical leftists attacking, and it's funny because on one end they talk about animal rights and everything. You saw radical leftists attacking Jains for being militant vegetarians, right? I mean, this is the type of
Hmm. Shocking.
thing that they're not willing to accommodate us. Whereas I'll tell you, even my own personal experience, right? I was invited to the RNC headquarters 1 2 years back. I told them I was vegetarian and it was also Chaturmas. So I told them I couldn't eat onions, I couldn't eat eggplants. That's the tradition we have in Maharashtra. Plus, I also don't take milk from American cows because I don't like the way that the cows are treated in America.
Hmm.
Republicans, they didn't know what, Hindu dietary restrictions were, right? So they had no idea what to do with this. But these people, I mean, I saw the Republican Party officials were talking, directors of, Asian engagement, the director of strategic operative, they all sat down and hours they researched, okay, what can Hindus eat? What can they not eat? They consulted with different people. They asked, is this allowed to eat? Is this not allowed to eat? They took the time to make sure that I would have food. Democrats don't want to do that, right? They'd rather just, have the samosas and after that, give me some chicken tikka masala and claim that they're being diverse. I mean, the Mexicans have been told that they need to have nachos and they need to, talk one or two in
Okay.
Spanish. The African Americans have been told that they need to,
Hmm.
stick to this narrative of being poor, oppressed, and victims. Anytime someone tried to say, look, no, we're not a monolith, that there's something more complex, that, we're actual human beings. The Democrats don't like it. And
Yeah.
so, because the Republicans are willing to see them as human beings, we were, of course, the party that abolished slavery. You're seeing ethnic minorities in droves go over to the Republican side. In fact, a lot of these new in the Gen Z, right? A lot of the new state senators that are being elected from the Republican Party, people of color. I'm seeing so many Black Americans, so many Mexican Americans, so many Hindu Americans that are coming now and getting involved in politics on the Republican side. I'm not seeing as many on the Democrat side. And I think that, give it 10, 20 more years and you're going to see a complete change in the demographics as to who votes for what side, unless the Democrats can get their act together.
Okay. Richa, I would take that to you and ask you, there is one event that was observed about 2 years ago. One of the states, uh, they commemorated October 2022 as, dedicated to Hindus or India. And talking to the organizers, the people who mobilized support for that event, they said that Hispanics took as many as 30 years to get recognized by the United States as a distinct ethnic group, which Vishwa Hindu Parishad, their wing in the United States, managed to do in far less time. That happened under Joe Biden's administration. So is a Democrat still perceived as anti-Hindu or anti-India or anti-BJP Modi, etc.?
Two parts. One is the Hindu Heritage Month, which in October was recognized as the, few years ago. I mean, you know
Yes,
what? It has been recognized, but
2022.
yes, 2022. I was part of that
Yes.
movement also. So I want to just say that Democrats are very good at giving these sort of facelift stops that, okay, look, we're doing this for you. They'll come to your Diwali party, they'll do. But now what are they doing as a party in terms of policy? I think that is what is the bottom line, isn't it? So if you look at it, you will find that between the Republicans and the Democrats, there is no real policy difference because their movement towards a say US-India relationship, it is going to be a very, very policy driven, and it'll involve a lot of thought, a lot of sort of paperwork. So things don't move that quickly in terms of change of policy. It is always like that, 90-10 sort of difference. And I don't see any difference whether the Republicans come in or the Democrats come in how the US India relationship will exist. The optics may be different, so this is an optic that okay, they recognize the Hindu Heritage Month. I don't think we are still receiving the kind of recognition in official spheres as we should.
Yeah.
We are not. We haven't been
What
officially
was kind of surprising was that caste thing, recognizing caste discrimination to be a fact in the United States, which surprised a lot of people, because however casteist Indian society might be, once they move to the US as a community in the United States, I don't think Indians, practice discrimination.
No, this was an extremely overly manufactured issue, and we have proven it everywhere. Whether it's the Cisco case, it was dismissed. Whether the BAPS case, it died down. All of the bills and they are just languishing. The bills and resolutions. So they are just again woke optics from the Democratic Party, and that is why they have earned the ire. And it is also I think you brought up the very important point of the media. The media again has never played fair. I've personally experienced it. They will not present a viewpoint of an anti-establishment viewpoint of the. So the media is also co-opted in many ways. It is very, very left-leaning right now, and so is the academia. So these are the things that make a difference. Now, Colorado, one of the questions that I want to quickly point out in two lines is that you asked me about Colorado, what's happening here. Now, the important large trend that's happening is there's a major exodus from California, which is got all of these IT companies. They're moving to sort of say, some of them have come to Colorado, Iowa, here, there. They're going to the red states, Texas even. So all of these red states are now slowly attracting migrants. And what happens? They turn slightly blue, pink, purple, right? So that impact has affected Colorado also. Earlier it was this cowboy belt, redneck, very red, very red. But now you see out of the six counties, the districts, you have 3 red, 3 blue. So we are already seeing that impact, and that is happening all over America. That change of red to little blue, purple, pink is happening. So yeah, those are the large trends.
So my final question is to all of you. You may take it up one by one. There are some very complex situations in geopolitics right now. United States, along with India, they are members of Quad, which purportedly was formed to contain China. At the same time, recently, India participated, Prime Minister Modi participated in BRICS summit, which in a way appears to be an attempt to contain the United States. Now, amidst all this, 2 years ago, there was this Russia-Ukraine war that broke out, and amidst all these sanctions on Russia, China and India kind of bailed Russia out by buying their oil and natural gas. And for some reason, maybe in appreciation of the fact that India is now a major power, the United States did not take it to the extremes. They did not put sanctions on India as well. And then we have Iran. Because of US sanctions on Iran, India does not have the option of buying cheaper oil from Iran, nor does it have the option of going ahead with the Chabahar project in Iran, because there again, the United States is a roadblock. Now, in the middle of all this, a new development happened in the economy of the world, which is that China has emerged as the only viable supply chain right now, which is why despite the Galwan skirmishes in May 2020, India is now once again reaching out to China, just the way China had reached out to India after the Doklam standoff, when they found India to be too valuable a market to ignore for a very small piece of land. So, how do you think this particular foreign policy of the United States is going to shape depending on whether Democrats or Republicans form the next US government? Professor Rao, you first.
Yeah, the foreign policy plank is really shifting. Of course, the Ukraine war is the major one. Now, of course, Gaza and Israel. And
Yes.
the U.S. has had an express interest. You know more about Bangladesh, what is happening there. That's the big one. And India is really caught. And thankfully, we do have very savvy, experienced diplomats like our Minister for External Affairs, who are trying to kind of
Hello?
walk carefully this particularly dangerous
Okay, so I'll tell him that you are
dynamic
okay,
in,
right?
in foreign policy affairs. Um, we have, for example, what is happening in Canada in terms of Khalistan,
Oh,
the accusation that Canada is making
okay,
um,
okay.
against India, and then the Five Eyes, and therefore the U.S. is also supporting Canada in this, and therefore India will have to find ways of countering that kind of pressure. Um, and what best or what better way than to kind of make some adjustments in terms of the relationship with China. With Russia, of course, it has it has been a much longer and more steady kind of relationship, and that will and again, I think Narendra Modi is considered by other global leaders as the person who can maybe make a difference and bring to some kind of a solution the Ukraine war. So there are these aspects that really no one is sure about. But I believe it would be better for India in terms of foreign policy if Trump would be elected. Of course, Trump would be much more, I think, harder, would take a harder stand in terms of tariffs and so on. But in terms of war, in terms of other kinds of diplomatic outreach, I think he would be better. Harris would
Okay.
merely repeat what the Biden administration has been doing. And that is a really, for me, as an Indian American, of very large concern.
Richa, how do you see this? Like India drawing closer to China or India drawing closer to United States? Which is better in Indian interest?
Okay, so I want to sort of take a different stance, something which we
Okay.
saw Jawaharlal Nehru take, okay? The non-aligned movement. Now, okay, that was
Mhm.
literally a movement that was started by India. I think Yugoslavia and Indonesia were part of it. And actually, that again, optics is the word of the day, probably. It did not really have much of an impact at that time, but Modi ji has actually made that his plank. Right now, if you see the way you mentioned initially in your comments, Suraji ji, is that yes, he has balanced it amazingly. It's a tightrope walk, but he has kept America and Europe sort of happy strategically, as well as China and Russia. So there is this whole sort of a divide, polarization of the left or Islamic world versus the democracies. But I think the Modi government and Modi foreign policy has played a remarkable role in keeping that non-aligned, India's strategic interests first as their foreign policy, and made it work. So that is a commendable feat by India, and I think that is something that they should continue doing. I also have Rutvij on the phone line, by the way. If I don't know if you
He's
would be able
unable
to
to
hear.
reconnect.
He's unable to reconnect. His phone
Oh,
died,
okay,
but
okay.
we have him.
Sorry about that, but I have time only for one more question. Would either of you or both of you like to stick your neck out and call the election? Who is winning?
Well, this is the thing. Astrologers, Indian astrologers, including, are all over the place. American, pollsters are all over the place. Mr. Lichtman, Professor Lichtman, is now, going back and forth. So it is something that it's very really difficult to call. But my sense is that Trump could pull off a victory. Who knows?
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting. Richa, what do you think? Who's winning?
I think it's down to the wire. Like I said, it is
Okay.
totally down to the wire. It is so difficult to predict. You've seen the upset that Hillary versus Trump had, where,
Mhm.
Hillary was so well planned with a mega ball plan for the victory, but Trump won. We saw a messy election in 2020 where people were questioning the whole electoral process. So someone told me that they should outsource even the election process to India because America is not doing a good job with
But
the
I
chats,
also remember
with
long
votes.
ago, 24 years ago, in the year 2000, Florida was going nowhere. It could have gone either way when George Bush Jr.
Yeah.
won finally. And the way the Trump, the last time Trump refused to acknowledge the results, and he has still not accepted the 2020 verdict. There were Democrats who were saying in the year 2000 and up to 2004 that was unfair. George Bush winning it was unfair. And Florida always has, a last minute glitch. So there are, of course, peculiarities of different
Yes.
states. But thank you very much,
Yeah, I want to point one
all
more
of
thing.
you.
We've seen
Yeah,
vote ballots burnt, like the mail-in ballots burnt in
yes,
Oregon and other places. The kind of attack on American democracy that we are seeing right now,
right.
the kind of
And
anarchy
also
that we're
some
seeing
very
right now.
unseemly protests on the streets. Once the elections have been announced, the results have been announced. 4 years ago, I remember, very unsavory and unseemly sights were observed in the streets of the United States, across states. And hope that is not repeated. Let's also hope that the 6th January 2021 Capitol Hill riot, nothing like that happens again. Let's hope for a peaceful and peaceful outcome of this election, and also may the most deserving candidate and party win. Thank both of you, and also Rutvij, who left us a bit earlier.
Ritesh is
Uh,
on the speaker right now, so he's listening.
okay, so Rutvij has a problem with audio, I think, with the camera, but not with audio.
Can you hear him?
So
No,
Rutvij,
yeah.
can you join us from there? We can hear you, maybe.
Yeah.
No, we can't connect. So that's it, folks. That was what some of our Indian friends in America have to say about the U.S. presidential elections that is happening tomorrow. So we will keep you hooked onto more insight in the coming days about the U.S. presidential elections. Thank you very much for joining the show. Thanks a lot.